Hey guys, Ken here. These are the Hexas. They're a 4-driver IEM coming from TRUTHEAR, a company that's kind of been killing it in the IEM space lately. So these have 1 dynamic driver and 3 balanced armatures. Frequency response spans from 8 Hz to 40,000 Hz, so plenty of headroom both ways. Impedance is 20.5 ohms and sensitivity is 120 dB, so they're plenty easy to drive, but these will benefit from using an amp and a DAC, and we'll get into that. Now, the gist of these is that these are really good, and not just good for the price. They just sound good, period. Overall, they offer a bright neutral sound, really good imaging, incredible detail, they sound really articulate, and they've made it into my regular rotation of headphones that I normally cycle through. And all of that for $80. Let's get into the details. Now, I normally don't really care about the unboxing experience, but for what it's worth, these do come in a nice package. In typical niche IEM fashion, you get your anime waifu on the box. I appreciate the art, it actually adds something to the packaging, and I also appreciate that it doesn't look like it came from the fantasy of an overly perverted weeb. Inside, you get the same anime character. In here is all the documentation if you need, and here are the IEMs themselves. So here are the Hexas. Underneath, you get your cable here. You also get a fake leather case. It's not the most protective or the highest quality, but I do appreciate that they give you something to at least store the IEMs in. Underneath the case, you get your assortment of ear tips. So you have your wide bore, small, medium, large tips, and then your narrow bore, small, medium, and large tips. And you also get a pair of foam tips right here as well. Generally, the narrow bore tips will boost the bass and emphasize the low end a little bit more. It'll warm up the sound a bit. Typically, the wider bores tends to be a bit more of the neutral, more spacious sound. So the IEMs themselves are basically fully plastic, which is totally fine. They're nice and lightweight. The outer shell is a nice black piece of plastic with the TRUTHEAR branding right there. The inside is a semi-transparent resin, so you could kind of see what's going on the inside. Nice for nerds like myself, and it seems to be built very, very well. The setup is typical for IEMs. It's just kind of a plug and play deal. Just make sure that you're plugging the right cable into the right side. The cable tip will have an R and an L to designate right and left. And after that, you just pick the ear tip that fits the best. I am basically a bona fide medium, and I typically just stick with the wide bores. Now the cable itself is actually really nice. Very little memory, gets tangled from time to time, but it is moderately microphonic. Now the comfort is actually really good. I could wear these for very long periods of time. The only problem is that for some reason on the left side, it's really hard for me to get a proper seal. I don't know if it's just my unit or the shape of my ear, but my wife does say the same thing. It's the left IEM that for some reason I just can't get a good seal on. Now besides that, the physical qualities are actually great. The build and comfort are really good, and I think it all comes together into a really good looking set of IEMs. Now let's get into the sound quality, because that's the most important part of these. Now when it comes to the bass, quality over quantity is the name of the game, but not to the point where these sound overly dry or anemic. Sub-bass extension is very good. Now what I mean by quality over quantity is that even though you don't get a ton of bass, the bass that you get is very high quality. It's very good. The detail that you sound in the bass is very good. It's very articulate. In return for sacrificing quantity, you get no muddiness in the low end, and you could hear basically everything that's going on down there. Another benefit is that it doesn't intrude on the mids. It just kind of occupies its own space. Now, if you do want more bass with these, you could switch these out to the narrow bore tips. It will significantly tilt the sound to a much warmer sound signature. Now, adding a DAC will fill out the bass and improve it quite a bit in terms of fullness, cleanliness, and detail. Now, if you can't tell, these are not bass monsters, but they will represent the bass properly. Now for the mids, there's not a whole lot to talk about. The relatively neutral bass does allow the mids to come through very nicely. The mids are very clear and very detailed. You might actually start to notice some details in music that you've missed on certain headphones and IEMs in the same price range. Vocals are nice and intimate, and instruments sound very articulate and in balance with the lows and the highs. Sound and instrument separation are really good on these. If you like bright sounding IEMs, you'll probably be a fan of these. These lean relatively bright, and as a result, detail retrieval is very, very good. There's a lot of air in the sound, but these never come across as harsh or sibilant. I was actually starting to hear a lot of details in songs that I've never heard before. Not sure if it was because of these or if I was just paying attention a little bit more. Now for the overall sound characteristics, these are a bright neutral with good sub-bass extension. As far as soundstage goes, these started out kind of narrow and really disappointing, but as I ran them in and I listened to them more, it actually opened up, and soundstage is actually really good now. Imaging is really, really good. Instrument and sound separation are also excellent. And like I mentioned, detail retrieval is really, really good as well. Now the sound will improve noticeably with a good DAC and amp, and you'll notice two things. First, the bass will noticeably fill out and improve in basically every way. Now I'm not talking about amount of bass, I'm talking articulation, detail, and just overall cleanliness, and it just sounds more confident. And the second thing that I noticed was that it was almost as if a veil was lifted off of the music. The sound was just not as cloudy, and it was a lot more detailed. And putting all of that together, you get a sound that is clean, articulate, and revealing. It's a sound that's hard to be mad at. If there's one thing that I could fault these for, it's that these just don't have a magical it factor, if that makes any sense. Now for all my listening tests, I was listening to lossless files through Apple Music, running through a FIO BTR5. Now all the songs that I'm going to mention can be found on the Audiophile Arcade and Bass Testers playlist linked down below. Unfortunately, just Spotify. In Equal by ODESZA, the bass detail is very, very good. It keeps the bass nice and fat, but it never masks the vocals. Everything is just represented in a well-balanced way. Lunch by Billie Eilish, new song. Everything is very balanced. The bass is detailed and articulate. Rumble by Skrillex. This is a very challenging song because there's a lot going on in the low end. The bass stays nice and fast and articulate, which is critical for this song. In fact, these make that song sound relatively effortless. The World Can Wait by Michael FK is a good example of why bass-centric songs do tend to suffer a little bit through these. The drop is a little bit thin in the low end. The sub is nice and heavy, but the mid bass is slightly recessed. So the bass suffers a little, but the rest of the instruments benefit from the increased space. So the strings during the second drop are beautiful. They're given ample space, but we do want the bass to be relatively forward in a song like this. The problem is fixed, however, with a good DAC and narrow bore tips. Dreams by Fleetwood Mac was actually an excellent performance through these. You'll notice that the vocals are nice and up front with the kick and bass right underneath. Now when the other instruments and the backing vocals come in, they will push the kick and the bass slightly back and just take up the space right next to the vocals. This song really benefits from the excellent instrument separation of these. The hi-hats and the top region of the vocals are very detailed. Listen for the bits of saturation and color that was added to the vocals. Mood Ring by Lorde is also an excellent performance. Guitars are nice and crisp, the vocals come through very, very nicely, and the vocals during the chorus just come through as a beautiful wall of sound. And finally, Time by Hans Zimmer. This is an excellent track to stress test any sound system because there's so many layers and so many distinct instruments playing at the same exact time. While it's not the best performance, all of the different layers and instruments are at least partially audible throughout the biggest part of the song. A very commendable performance for the price range. So personally, I really like the sound. Again, the only thing that I could really fault these for is that they don't have a magical it factor. They sound great, but it's not anything that really sticks out from the crowd because it has some magical character behind it. So the Hexas are for the individual looking for a detailed, neutral set of IEMs with good sub-bass extension. The sound is balanced to leaning bright, but if you wanted to give it a warmer tilt, using the narrow bore tips will give you more bass. If you can't tell by now, these will probably sound very bass light and anemic to bass heads. So a couple of quick comparisons to other IEMs in this space. First up is the TRUTHEAR Zero Reds, which come in at $55. Now the Zeros are much warmer, but the Hexas are far superior when it comes to things like dynamics, imaging, instrument separation, and detail retrieval. I also think that vocals are much better on the Hexas. However, if you want IEMs that are warmer and still more than acceptable when it comes to the technical aspects like dynamics, detail, you might like the Zero Reds more. Next up are the 7Hz Salnotes Zero, which are insanely good for $20. In fact, if you only have $20 to spend on a pair of IEMs, just get the 7Hz Zeros. It's not even a question, it's the easiest recommendation. But if you pay the premium for the Hexas, you get a noticeable jump in detail, instrument separation, imaging, and soundstage. This is just to give you an idea of what you get if you do pay 4 times the price for the Hexas. And lastly, the Salnotes Diokos, which come in at $99. This is kind of a hard comparison because the Diokos are planar magnetic IEMs. The bass is noticeably faster and warmer on the Diokos. It also has that characteristic planar vastness to the sound, but you do need more power to get good sound out of the Diokos. In comparison to the Hexas, which are neutral that tilts bright, the Diokos are neutral that tilts warm. Now personally I like both, but I would probably pick up the Diokos a little bit more often. So to me, these are a great step forward against comparably priced IEMs within the sub $100 range. So just to recap some of the strengths of the Hexas, you get great detail without being sibilant, great instrument separation, great soundstage and imaging, really good bass detail and quality, balanced sound, and articulate sound. Some weaknesses, these will probably sound bass light for bass heads, and it doesn't really impart much of a magic factor. Again, these are not just good for the price, they're just good. Honestly, these are probably one of the best values at $80 and one of the best IEMs that you could get under $100. If you have a contender for that title or other options for people to check out, please comment them down below. I definitely want to check them out as well. So if you made it this far into the video, thanks so much for watching. If you enjoy this type of content or if you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. That's always super helpful. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one.